There you go. And good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I am Nina Hirota. I have the honor to be the Vice President of Programs for the ATD Suncoast chapter. And it is my pleasure to welcome you and our speaker tonight. So thank you so much. I wanted to briefly introduce you to Sally Colella. We have the pleasure of having Sally, who's an executive coach, a book author, to talk about networking and specifically one of her areas of expertise, which is organizational network analysis. And if you followed my comments on LinkedIn, I think that the greatest point and takeaway after looking at Sally's presentation, at least to me, the first time I met you, Sally, was the realization that I was really missing the mark in terms of networking. And I feel like, especially in this day and age where most of us are operating remotely, that we are really just looking at networking from a perspective of personal interest or access to new or professional opportunities, and that we really miss the mark in leveraging all of the power that networking, good networking, can generate in terms of influence, expertise, new ideas, and even innovation. So Sally, as I was mentioning, is an expert in ONA, organizational network analysis, and will present some surprising research-based findings, but also a wonderful combination of her 20-some years of experience as an executive coach and an executive in the corporate world. So we will have the opportunity to reflect about our personal and professional networks and understand how to leverage them to be more effective and influential. I think we could all use that. But before I hand it over to Sally, I have a couple of housekeeping items. So please leverage the chat to post any comments, questions for Sally at any time. What I will do while she does the hard work of getting us to think and talk about ONA is monitor the chat for questions. If there's there's a question related to the subject at hand in particular, I'll nudge her and so we can make it as interactive as possible. But we are also leaving some time towards the end for Q&A, okay? So please keep your questions coming and know that we're going to be paying attention to what comes. The second housekeeping item is that you please, before we close, give us the gift of your feedback. And I will give you more instructions, a very, very simply 2-sentence comment on the chat as well before we close. And the last item to go over is to also let you know of what's coming. So on June 17th, we are going to have an executive panel with representatives from 4 rockstar executives and companies that have been that are recipients of multiple awards. And very timely, they're going to be talking about how they prepared and they have been managing their workforces throughout the pandemic, but how they are positioning themselves for the next iteration or the evolution of the future of work and for their organizations. Okay, I'm certain that we could all learn something from it. We're looking at 4 organizations that together not only represent over $200 billion in revenue, but also irrespective of the fact that their industries are so distinctive, that all of them share broad recognition about public recognition such as world's most admired companies, best companies to work for, most responsible companies, and on. So I am certain that there will be interesting findings and insights from the conversation with this phenomenal panel. Okay, so with that, allow me to hand it over to Sally. And Sally, thank you so much again for joining tonight. If you could share your screen with your presentation? Perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Nusa, for that introduction. I'm so glad to be here tonight and to see all of you. I just want to say, I love how Nusa started that. Nina, I'm sorry. I knew Nina when she used a different name at the World Bank. I just think it's such an interesting time after the more than a year that we've had with so many people working from their homes. And as I talk to people, as I talk to clients, I feel like the network has really changed this year, because I really think about our network as all of the key relationships that we have in our lives that really influence us, particularly for professional networks. It's people we talk to about work, that we get work done with. And for so many of us, our network has gotten not in person, it's gotten very much of an online network. And for many of us, it's actually shrunk because we're not having those kind of fortuitous meetings at different social events or sporting events. It's really come down to task-based and sessions like this. And so I think as we begin this next transition or phase, it's an excellent time for all of us to be thinking about, how has that worked for us? Have actually some of the relationships that we have not spent as much time on, has that been energizing for us? So do we want to maybe keep some of our network pared down? But what are the kinds of connections that we've missed that were really feeding us in terms of our thinking, in terms of our work? And how do we thoughtfully, intentionally re-engage those conversations? So I'm going to go back to sharing my slides, because tonight I want to do just a few things. One is, I've been involved in, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do. I've been involved in a field called Organization Network Analysis, or O&A. We used to call it Social Network Analysis when I first started, but it became too confusing with the advent of Facebook and social networking. But I've been involved in the field of O&A with Rob Cross and Gene Singer and others for more than 15 years. And through that work, I have learned a lot about networks. And so I'm going to share just a few slides about O&A so you can just get a taste of when I say our research or what we know about networks, you can get a sense of where that's coming from. Then I'm going to share some surprising network myths, things that really aren't true. And then I'm going to give you a way of really looking at your network. Because what we see across years of research is that when you look at really what supports both performance and well-being, it's having a particular type of network that we've been able to get very clear about what that is. So I'm going to be sharing that with you as we go. So organization network analysis is a technique we use, a survey tool, to map the networks of relationships in organizations. This is a very simple example of a O&A map, and each dot is a person and each line is a connection. And the arrow represents who goes to who for information. So this is an information sharing network. John goes to Lewis, Lewis and Carlo go to each other. And so we basically map the networks. We ask questions about who do you interact with, how helpful are they? What's the quality of the relationship? Is this other person energizing to you? Is there trust in the relationship? So we're looking at both the structure of the network and the quality of the connections. We're looking for a few things. Are there a few people that are very central to the network? Everyone is going to them. We want to know who those people are, and we want to know why. Are some people very loosely connected? So maybe don't really know who to go to for information or to get things done. And are there subgroups that really should be communicating with each other that aren't? So I'm going to ask you to on the next slide, I'm going to actually show you an example of a formal org chart and an ONA. And I'm going to ask you to compare the two, looking for these things. You know, who's central? Are some people loosely connected? Are there divisive subgroups? This is an actual network map of an oil and gas firm. This is the leadership team of the firm. They were working, drilling oil in the Gulf of Mexico. And the formal structure's on the left and the informal's on the right. So just take yourself off mute. What do you notice that's different? Who's central? Who's on the edge? What's different between the formal and the informal chart?
Mitchell Central.
Mitchell, what is going on with Mitchell? So he's way down here, and these people actually are peers. They just don't fit on the page the other way. But he's right here. Everyone is going to him. And I should say on this network map, we just included the people who are either helpful or very helpful. So they all know each other, but a lot of people find Mitchell either helpful or very helpful. What else do you notice in terms of differences between the two?
Well, Zaire and Schultz are also the two people. They're all in the geology, and they're also people that other people go to.
Absolutely, they're also big connectors in this network. What else do you notice?
Let's see.
Mayor's isn't very connected.
Oh,
Right. So you have your senior vice president. Now they know him, but when you ask the question, is he helpful or very helpful? Very few people are saying yes. And so where do you think he came from in the organization? If you had to guess in terms of the three divisions, where would you say he came from?
no.
Inside the organization.
Actually, he came from exploration. So he's connected only to Avery and Mitchell because they kind of think like he does. They're in the same vein. And sometimes we see that with, like, you know, the marketing people stay connected to the marketing people, the finance people stay connected to the finance people. And so this was a bit of a wake-up call for him. So when we do the network mapping, we know the structure of the network. We know who's central, but we don't really know why. So we have to go in and do interviews to kind of figure out what's going on. So have any of you ever known a Mitchell, like someone who's not at the top of the chart, but they're a go-to person? What are they like as people? Why do people become Mitchells? Any thoughts on that?
Because
They're
they're informative.
Gina, what did you say?
They're informative. They like to help.
Yeah, they're informative. Isabel, did you have something?
They're approachable.
Yeah, and so what was going on with Mitchell was two things. One was helpful, one wasn't. He actually had the sole access to the database that showed the topography of the ocean floor. So they were literally drilling for oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico. So you had to go to Mitchell to get this information. It was pretty much of a bottleneck. So we spread that out. But the other thing is, this is the Gulf of Mexico. These are all men. What do you think they do on the weekend?
Play golf.
Good
Right.
guess, Martha.
Fish.
Fish, yes, Jim. So, fishing in the summer, hunting in the winter. Mitchell's the organizer of the hunting and the fishing outings, and so you could make a call and find out, get your topography map, and figure out who was bringing gear this weekend. So very, very central, and often we see it's these social relationships where we get to know people, get to know veterans. I mean, those are the relationships that tend to sustain the test of time as we move into different companies and different roles. And so that really supported that. So that's just a little snapshot to give you a flavor, because what we do when we're looking for to understand the networks of high performers is we look at what does the structure of their network look like through this diagnostic tool. And then we're also looking for what are the behaviors that they're enacting? How are they developing this network? And we do a lot of that work through interviews. This is an example of an ONA that I did a couple years ago with Gene Singer, who's a close colleague. It was actually, this is a pharmaceutical company that's based in Paris with manufacturing in the south of France. And they had very, very important partnerships with partner organizations all around the world where they were distributing their product. But what was happening was they were not getting very strong information flow from the distributed network globally back to headquarters. And it was resulting in some major business challenges. And so the head of this area asked us to come in and map the network and to look at the relationships. So basically what the direction of these arrows told us is most of the information was flowing from headquarters out to these partners in the regions. It wasn't flowing back, but we pinpointed who the people were that were doing a really good job of this, both in the field and back in Western Europe. And we began to learn what they did. In this situation, we were actually able to bring all the people in the study together, and they were able to learn from the people that were really connected, how they were staying. And it was actually, what was most important was getting the flow of what regulatory agencies in these different countries were looking for back to HQ. And so we really improved that communication flow. So that's an example of kind of a organizational O&A. And through that, we learned for key individuals, what are the behaviors, what are the practices, what are the things that they were doing that was really working. So I'm gonna just kind of go through a few things about networks that you hear a lot that we've actually seen over the years. And I think what my bio doesn't say is I have worked with Rob Cross and Gene Singer and others in a group called the Connected Commons to really map and study hundreds and hundreds of organizations and networks, and to really see over time, what do these networks look like that are helping people thrive professionally and improving well-being. And what we see is it's not just a bigger network that's better. Actually, sometimes a big network gets in your way, which is why I see this year as a golden opportunity to be intentional about the size of your network, because sometimes people are so busy responding to emails and calls and meetings that they kind of can lose track of their own North Star and what they're here to do. And so it's not necessarily having a big network, and certainly not a random big network, but having a diverse network. So when you look at these two individuals, we were using Meryl Streep as someone who we call a boundary spanner. She has relationships in lots of different groups. And this could be many times in companies, just like the map I showed you, it's relationships in different geographic areas. But for some companies, it's relationships in different functions. But it's a network like Meryl Streep's in this picture, where you have that diversity of connections, where you can find information more quickly. Working with people who think differently really challenges your thinking. And these are the people who we see again and again get promoted more rapidly and do well in all kinds of different metrics. Now, the Arnold Schwarzenegger network here, he has just as many connections as the Meryl person, but they're all in the same area. And people who are very deeply embedded within their own immediate groups can be great at process improvement, solving problems. They know the area inside out. So they're important too, but it's really not the huge network. It's having a diverse network, and then most importantly, having real depth in your network. So you trust the people that you're connected with, they trust you, you get back to them. I've been really delighted as the years have gone by. I feel like the research that Rob Cross is doing and others is more and more highlighting the importance of trust and of staying connected to purpose as key things in terms of networks and how they really support our well-being. The next myth that we hear a lot is just a focus on reaching out, which is important. It is important to reach out and to make new connections. But just important is having a network mindset. And so when you face something new, or you're trying to do something different, or you're facing a new challenge, instead of turning first to an internet search, thinking about who might have faced this before. Who do I know who might have had this challenge? Who might know someone who would know something about this? Who's Mitchell, who knows someone in every department who could help me really get connected? So having that network mindset, being a giver. Adam Grant, in his wonderful book, Give and Take, does a great job of really demonstrating how the takers may make out well in the short term, but long term, it's people who are very generous, giving, sharing their network, sharing research. It's that kind of generosity that really builds connectivity and trust in networks. And then we say be intentional again and again, because it really is thinking about who are the people that are going to energize me? Who is aligned with doing the same sort of work that I'm doing? Who can I learn from and with? We can learn and grow together, and building the networks in those ways that are really important. Which really leads me to the other point, is it's just as important to enrich your existing network, to invest in the people who really help to connect you with what's important to you. Nurturing those relationships. Sometimes it's reconnecting. This would be a great time. There's probably a lot of people you haven't seen or heard from in the past year and a half. It's a great time to make connections with those people. And Nina just made one. We hadn't talked in years since we worked together. And she reached out. So it is really staying connected, reaching back. And then to be honest, I've been doing this work a lot with people new in their careers. And I mainly, my last bullet point, which is use a variety of modes, Slack, social media, telephone. My main point here is pick up the telephone from time to time. It's an amazing device, the telephone. It can be quick, it can be efficient. And I find, like I was just doing work a little while ago with a private equity firm, that the people that were really thriving in that firm, in this environment, were not afraid to pick up the phone and have a quick conversation. And, we're finding that that's so much more effective than some of the scheduling for Zoom and other things. So,
Sally,
oh,
there's a comment on the chat about how how you measured trust in the process. If you could comment at some point, that would be great.
yes, no, I mean, we directly ask in the survey when we have people go through and indicate who they collaborate with. So this is when we're doing a bounded network survey within an organization. We will actually ask a question that rates the level of trust that they have with the other person. So we can literally see the trust and connections between people using that survey tool. So we literally ask directly about the level of trust using a 5-point scale, with the degree of trust. So we can really see it that way. I also see the term used to refer to Meryl Streep's. The term that we have two terms that we use. We use either broker or boundary spanner. And so what we're really looking for is people who are reaching into groups that aren't connected to each other. And so that is one of the two key predictors of high performance, of success in networks, is those boundary spanning ties between different disconnected groups. So on this point, do think about reaching out, do think about, what are the areas I'm interested in going in the future? What am I working on now that's exciting? Who might want to learn about it? Who can I learn from and with? But also be sure to nurture existing connections. Just that quick note, seeing something, sharing with people, quick phone connections, reconnecting, being intentional. If you are being with people face to face, kind of being intentional about how you open that piece up is so important. The last one, and this is my last myth, and this is one of my favorites, is extroverts do it better. And so I think a lot of the networking literature over the years has really painted a picture of a certain set of behaviors, which have to do with the big network, lots and lots of communications. The message is like, never eat lunch alone and constantly be pinging people. For many people, that message is so exhausting that we just are like, this is too much. I'm not going to do it. What we actually see when we're mapping the networks, and many times we have Myers-Briggs data on participants, is that both introverts and extroverts can have very strong networks. Now, they usually approach it differently. Introverts tend to have more in-depth relationships over time. Extroverts tend to have larger networks, but maybe not quite the same depth or the same network connectivity around a particular area of interest. And this was really driven home to me. A few years ago, we did a big network map of 300 people that were in a global investment banking firm. And they are very busy. They don't have much time to fill a survey. So our survey had one question. That was it. Who do you collaborate with to generate revenue for the firm? That was the only question. And so we knew who was really central to generating revenue for the firm. And we went in and we started to interview them. What do you do? How do you work with your network? And the first person I talked to was a woman investment banker. And she said pretty much what you'd expect. I mean, she had a gorgeous office overlooking Times Square and told me, I live and breathe this firm. Every trip to the opera, every lunch, every soccer game, I'm talking our business. This is my life. I was like, well, that's kind of what you'd think, an extrovert, right? So then I went down a few floors to the trading floor, and the next person was a gentleman. His office was very Spartan, nothing on his desk, nothing on the walls. And I was like, well, how do you develop your network? And he said, well, I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't socialize with these people if my life depended on it. At 5 o'clock on Friday, I'm out of here, I'm back to my house. But I'm really good at solving problems. And so people line up outside my door all day. They come in here, they ask me a couple questions about my deal, their deal. I ask them a couple questions and they walk out with a new idea or clearer. And my point here is they both were super central to generating revenue for that firm, but they had very different ways of connecting, cultivating, working with their network. And so what we see again and again, it's finding what is going to be rewarding for you, that you're going to enjoy in terms of your approach. You know, is it one-on-one? Is it big group gatherings? What works best for you? So, and you know, again, we see the building trust, energizing others, creating a feeling of purpose matter most. The one thing that I do want to talk a little bit about is the energy. And so even more than the trust, what we have seen over time is we ask a question, which is when you interact with this person, does your energy level go up? Does it stay the same? Or do you walk out of that meeting exhausted, right? And we probably all have people that when we interact with, it improves our outlook and engagement. And we probably all can think of people that when we engage with, we need to recover. And we map that and we can see who the energizers are in organizations. And we've done tons of interviews with energizers and the people that work with them. And it really, really is people that are willing to see the big picture, but be real, have a sense of direction, but give space for other people, have a sense of humor, and just kind of keep the energy moving. And I think for me, one of the most important things is there are some people that are de-energizing every day. And there are very few people who are energizing every day. Most of us are in the middle, and we can be pretty energizing to ourselves and others when we're having a good day. And when we're having a bad day, not so much. And so just kind of watching that and watching how our energy is impacting others, you know, we think is such an important piece of this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about looking at your network. So let me just take a breath here. What questions, reactions do you have? You can put them in the chat, raise hands, take yourselves off mute.
Sally, I had a question. I often find that my coachees talk about networking feels like marketing myself. It feels like branding myself. It feels like selling, and that feels icky. You know,
Yeah.
that feels like manipulative. It feels like, you know, quid pro quo. It's just, I want to have nothing to do with it. I'm sure you get that as well. Does network analysis or your research has it supported sort of how to respond to that and how to support people?
Well, I think, you know, I get that all the time. You're right.
Mhm.
And I think it's a lot of, I mean, for one thing, I really encourage all of us to think about forming relationships that are going to benefit both people. So if you think about I'm networking to get something for myself and you're viewing it very transactionally, I think it can feel really, just as you described, Christiana, like, look, you know, it's all about me and I don't want to do that. If you think about, I'm embarking on this project, my colleague over here has just done something similar. I bet if I share with them what we're doing and they share with me, I bet we can learn from each other as we go. And I think the more that we think about the network as enriching both parties and being in that very generous, I think giving, being a giver to the people that you're networking with, I think it's that, for me, it's kind of that shift in mindset that makes a big difference. Because I think you're right. If you're keeping score and it's all about yourself, it can feel very objectionable to people. All right, so I do want to do a little bit to just have you think about and reflect on your network. If everyone could just take out a piece of blank paper and a pen or a pencil, I just would love to have you jot down names or initials of, you know, 5 to 10 people who, when I say, like, they're the you really rely on for conversations that are important to you. You can do it professionally or personally, but I usually, when I'm working with clients, we're thinking about kind of who do you have conversations with that really matter to you about things in your work and in your professional life. They don't have to be co-workers. They can be a partner or a friend. but just kind of who do you talk to about things that really matter to you? So let me just be quiet for a minute and let you jot down, maybe 5 to 10 names or initials of people who you think of. They may be people you talk to once a year, but when you have that conversation, it really impacts you. I want to walk you through a particular way of looking at your network. So you can keep jotting down the names while I just begin to talk through this. This is a network analysis that actually I did with one of my coaching clients. And you don't have to have an O&A to work with yourself or with others to look at their networks. There's another way to do it, which is how we're doing it. Who are the people that you interact with who really shape how you think about work, the actions you take? What's that core network for you, which is the term of art for it in the science is an ego net, but it's really the people you identify as reaching out to. When I did this with my client, and she works for an accounting firm, we began with her team and kind of the team of people that really are the go-to people for her within the firm who help her think about the work that she's doing. But she also added a couple, her partner, her spouse, and a running buddy, because they ended up talking a lot about her challenges at work, and they were very helpful for her. And then she was in the legal department for the firm, and there was an association in Manhattan of other attorneys that worked for accounting firms that she belonged to. And there were 3 colleagues she had that had really similar roles at other firms. And so she really relied on them. And as we talked about her network and what she really wanted to accomplish, what she realized is she really wanted to broaden the role of the legal department and make it much more of a risk management function, but she didn't really know anyone who had done that. And so together we identified some people that were doing that work within some of the bigger professional services firms in New York. And she was able to reach out to them and to begin to have conversations. They were very eager to talk to her. Professional services firms are always, out to generate business. So they were very glad to talk to her. And she began to really think about this network that was going to help her advance this vision for the legal function within her firm. So this was my client's network. What we did then, once we got the names down, and I'd like to ask you to do this with the names you've jotted down. This is some work that Rob Cross, who has done a lot of the research and is a very close colleague, has done with Greg Pryor, who's at Workday. And Greg and Rob came up with a really simple way of looking at our networks that I think is really, really helpful, which is about the types of conversations that we have and the types of conversations that are really helpful to have in terms of our work and our lives. And so as you look at your list, who are the people that when you have a conversation, you think, you innovate? I have a friend named Kathleen, and every time I talk to Kathleen, I feel like I walk away from the conversation with more IQ points because she just asks these great questions and I just think about things differently. So just jot down, you can jot down like a T on your list, kind of who are the people who you really feel like further your thinking in your network. And then, and I think after we do this, Nina, we'll go into breakout groups and do a little reflection on it. Then think about who helps you get things done. And so who helps you execute? These can be colleagues, coworkers, they can be people who give you ideas for how to get things done, but they really have great ideas for how to make things, kind of when the rubber hits the road, people kind of think about who helps you execute. And then the next one, which is so important, is around who helps to attract support for your ideas. Within organizations, these can be more senior people. I always really encourage people to really think about building those relationships with their bosses, peers, and other people who are more senior who can have that strategic perspective. One of the most challenging things to do, especially in these times, but having a network for those of us that are independents, really people that have helped advise us, helped support our business growth, who really helps you in that area. The next one is we see that people do well in organizations where they can use the connections that they have to learn and adapt. So these would be people that when you're facing a new challenge or something that's that you don't quite know how to do. I know for me, my business, for most of us, I would say, I remember actually last January of 2019, a client asked me if I could use the Zoom breakout rooms, and I told them I had no idea how to do that, which seems unbelievable to me. I feel like I could put people into Zoom breakout rooms in my sleep. So, you know, a lot of us have had to learn how to work in a very different way this year, not just online, but a lot has changed. And so who helps you? And also just when you get down or when you get frustrated with all that's going on, who can help you bounce back? And then the last one is something that you may not have jotted down in your initial names when I put it more with a work frame, but who really helps to promote physical, emotional health. I mean, we see a gentleman named Nicholas Christakis, and this is all in my, there's a little bibliography with all the names I'm mentioning. But Nicholas Christakis has done a lot of work looking at the networks of people around diet and exercise and other forms of well-being, and just sees incredible impact in terms of physical and mental health in terms of who we interact with. And so for me, a big one I would think about on Thrive is who's energizing to you. And like when you look at your list, when you talk to this person, you leave that conversation, with some new ideas or some excitement. You really, really want to pay attention to that, because it can really, what we see in the research, I didn't really say this, what we see in the research with energizers, it's the best predictor of high performance in organization, and then their whole team's benefit. So having that impact, not being an energizer bunny, but energizing, having those interactions energize others is just so important in our research. So the other thing that's not on this slide in terms of, you know, this is kind of the diversity of the types of conversations you have. The other thing that we're seeing that I've been paying a lot of attention to this year is how diverse are our networks around traditional diversity measures in terms of race and gender and sexual orientation and age. I mean, there's so much ability. And what we know from the research is that most people tend to, especially when you get to the network of people you talk to about things that really matter, most of us tend to have very homogenous networks. And so a lot of us tend to have networks of the same race, same gender. And so one of the things that I'm really interested in is how do we all think about that creatively? How do we diversify our networks so that when we talk about things that really matter, we're talking to people that actually have very different perspectives than we do in life. And so that's another, I remember the first time we brought Rob Cross in, it was when I was in Fannie Mae in 2003. And I remember we were doing a network analysis and people were going through their ego nets. And I remember one of the finance guys saying, I think tongue in cheek, he said, my entire network is white males. Is that a problem? And it kind of always rings in my ears like, I don't know. Let's think about that. So anyway, you might want to think about that too as you look at your network, because we're going to put you into the breakout groups and just share a little bit, introduce yourselves. This will be maybe a 7 or 8 minute breakout group. So it's quick, but just share yourself. Think about these 5 network benefits. Was your network pretty diverse here? You're in this, if you're here tonight after a long day of work, you're probably pretty committing to networking. Some of you probably have great diverse networks, but talk about that. If you'd like to share how diverse your network is around these traditional measures that I've mentioned, it's a really, really important indicator too, in terms of how diverse thinking and feeling you're being exposed to. And then where would you like to extend your network? What do you want more of in your network? Is there anything you want less of in your network? What are some things that you would like to change? So I think maybe these questions, if I can copy and put them in the chat, or why don't I do that so that you have them in your breakout rooms? Are we in pretty good shape for the breakouts, Nina?
Yes, we are, Sally. Now there was a question from Tanara about whether people could be in multiple categories.
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. It's really on the one hand, there's an incredible benefit. Like you may have one person who fits in every single those areas for you. They're every single network purpose, you have those conversations, and that's great. What you want to watch out for is if you get you have just one or two people who you're kind of relying on for everything. It's good sometimes to kind of open that up, but you definitely can have people in multiple categories. Thank you so much for that, Tanara.
Perfect. So we are ready for the breakouts. You're going to be automatically redirected. How long do they have, Sally? It's 6:44.
Yeah, I am thinking let's do 8 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Opening up. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you for handling that. My breakout room, both people had really rich experiences with their networks during the past year, really enriching their networks. So
Oh, wow.
really fun to hear about.
Love that.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome back, everyone.
Let's hear just from a couple of people, or you can drop things into chat. What's one key takeaway, kind of something you took away from looking at your network, or just anything I've shared? Just what's a key takeaway for you from what we've talked about so far? Pia.
So I think one of the things that we agreed on was that trying to make really strong interpersonal relationships via Zoom were much harder than, in person, because you didn't sort of get that warm and fuzzies all the time,
Yeah, it's a very different thing.
Mm-hmm.
How about for others?
The room I was in was an interesting balance of, in some cases, the reinvesting in networks and in people that you hadn't talked to in a while, kind of like you and Nina did, was easier during the pandemic, because people didn't, not that they didn't have other stuff to do, but it was just easier to kind of create that time.
Right.
And then in some ways, the small friend group didn't really grow like it otherwise would have. I know that happened for me, where I had my few friends that I met with consistently throughout COVID, but it didn't, right? It was just the few of us, and it didn't really expand like I like it to. So
Yeah,
it can help and hurt, right? Depending on, I guess, how you're investing in that network.
exactly.
Kimberly posted an interesting comment that they went down a different rabbit hole and didn't answer any of the questions. What did the conversation revolved around? I'm just curious if you could comment.
Actually, I was in the group with Pia, so I thought it was funny that she actually answered the question first. She participated first in the group conversation here. But we talked about how the differences in how people connect in person and online, and the dynamics of it. And it was interesting because Pia said something about side conversations that happen when you're in a group setting, but yet you're like whispering to somebody or something. And I hadn't thought of that before, and hadn't appreciated the nuance of that aspect of developing conversation with others.
Excellent. Anybody else would like to comment?
I think I'm walking away, especially during COVID, really being grateful for the boundary spanners who supported me. Like, they helped me span boundaries and connect to other people whose worlds I normally would not be able to enter. And also, when I've done that for others, I feel like it's so wonderful to offer it to others, and it's great to be able to ask for it, or people might even step forward and offer it without being asked for it. But that boundary spanner, I'm really walking away with the importance of that role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really is. Thank you for that, Christiana.
I shared an interesting perspective. It's kind of different from what everybody else has shared. I work for a global organization, and I made the comment that I've actually made more connections in the last year, international connections, than I did in the first 9 that I worked for the organization, which is pretty incredible. So what I need to work on, though, is expanding that network outside of, my organization, which is exactly why I'm here tonight. But internally, it's grown immensely over the last year, which has been interesting.
I love that.
I know, it's beautiful, Amber. Thank you. I mean, I know that Nina has one more thing she wants to do, so I'm gonna close my part with a poem that I love. It's by David White, and it's Working Together. And he talks about the intangibles around us, which is how I see the network. We shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible, working together in common cause to produce the miraculous. I'm thinking of the way the intangible air traveled at speed round a shaped wing, easily holds our weight. So may we, in this life, trust to those elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles about us.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I love it.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
So I wanted to use the last minute, first off, and before we thank Sally, to take a photo of this group as a way of networking, because we're going to post it on social media. So if you're comfortable and wouldn't mind turning your webcam on and give us a big smile, I promise you I'm going to count to 3 before taking the screenshot. Let's just see. Perfect. Thank you all for turning your webcams on. Are you ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you so much. I was able to capture. And before you leave, if you could please give us the gift of your feedback. And we are just asking 2 sentences pretty much, or 2 comments. www, what worked well, and EBI. It would be even better if. So if you could please leave us a comment, we'll appreciate it. And Sally, so wonderful to reconnect with you. My goodness, it felt like I was watching the presentation I saw years back at the bank with a completely new perspective. And there's always room for improvement. So thank you so much. Just so everybody knows, Sally's also generously allowing us, leaving us with a copy of her presentation. This is going to be posted on the website. Okay. And with that, oh, thank you so much for your feedback. Actually, let's savor them, Sally.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for scientific insight for introverts. I'm a fake extrovert, so I love that.
No, you're not, Nina.
I am. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah.
Thank you,
Sally,
buddy.
thank
That
you
was
so
great.
much for presenting. That was fascinating.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you all very much. And
All right.
you all have a good night. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally.
Welcome.
I'll send you a
Thank you.
transcript later. Thank you. You all have a good night.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to go network now.
Let me stop the recording.